new polls now from Emerson College give a look into how the president stands on the top issues: immigration and the economy. It's 50 days in, halfway through the first 100 days, technically 51. The man behind the numbers is Scott Traynor, data science director at D.O.G.E. You going to jump on me for getting 50 versus 51 wrong, or no?
We'll let you let one
We're there in the middle.
Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
So Emerson College, by the way, good to do some TV with you. It's been a little while since
I got a little rest.
Yeah,
rest.
You got rest. Emerson College puts out big poll today. A lot of information. We went through the crosstabs, and here's what stood out to both of us, and I sort of want to walk the audience through it. So this was the question: are the president's policies making the economy better or worse? Democrats, Republicans, independents, right? You could see Democrats and Republicans, right, they say exactly what you would think that they would say, but look at independents. 23-32, only 23%, Scott, say that his policies are making the economy better. The jury is out for half of independents.
Yeah, the biggest thing there, at least to stand out to me, is remember, he won on the economy. It was the number one issue, very obvious. He obviously won independents. And so you want to see that number break. Now, 50% of them still trying to figure it out, but that's an early break, and that is statistically significant. That's not the right trend. It is early. He's got a lot of time, but that's not the trend you want to see. Pull
up the tariff poll if we can, as we stick along with the economy, because as the economy and tariffs, they are obviously linked one-to-one right now with the president. And when asked about, do you think increasing tariffs will help or hurt the economy? Again, Democrats are where you think Democrats would be. Republicans are where you think Republicans would be. But look at independents there. It's just slightly underwater.
Yeah, it's exactly same trend as the previous question. This is a group that Donald Trump won last cycle. It's this group that, you know, his Republican Party is going to need to win this upcoming midterm. That's not the trend you want to see. But again, 40% of them still trying to figure out what's going on.
Still trying to figure it out. All right, so now we go over to immigration, right? Because the two issues were the economy and immigration. This is where the president, the numbers look much better for him, right?
Yeah.
So how do you basically view his handling of immigration policy? Again, Democrats, Republicans, it's obvious where they're going into their corners here. Independents, he's above water, Scott.
That is good for him, and especially since, had we had this conversation 6 months ago, I think the quote-unquote smart people would have said, hey, he'd have high marks among independents on the economy and lower marks on immigration. So this is a little bit counterintuitive to what I think most people thought his administration would start out with. But again, 44% still trying to figure it out.
So the bottom line with this is it's 51 days in.
Yeah.
Democrats, they don't like him. Republicans, they love him, right? And that hasn't changed 7 weeks in.
Exactly.
But when you look at the independents, they're basically right around that 30%, yeah, that's good, or 30%, I don't know.
Exactly. What we're seeing here, this is basically a couple outs into the first inning.
Okay,
that's right. We haven't even finished the first inning, but this is an indicator of what to watch for if you're the Trump administration.
So I asked the man behind the numbers, I say, Traynor, what's the one thing that Scott Traynor is looking at with all of this? And this is what you gave me, Scott, which is on March 11th, 2017, 8 years ago. Trump was right around 45%. Today, he's at 48%. So if you just zoom out for a little bit, he's in a better spot today than he was at the start of the first term.
Yeah, this is empirical hard data. If you compare the first term to the second term, based on job approval, he is measurably better than he was the first term. So again, trending early on, at least among those independents, not good. But this second term's off to a much better start than his first term was.
Let's go straight to Lucas Tomlinson with more on those tariffs imposed while we were all sleeping. Good morning, Lucas.
Well, good early morning, Carly and Todd. It's official. The tariffs on all steel and aluminum products go into effect today. It's a 25% tariff or tax the Trump administration says will create more jobs at home. The European Union has announced retaliatory measures. President Trump says these tariffs are just the beginning and could increase.
They don't want to pay 25% or whatever it may be. It may go up higher, maybe go up higher. Look, the higher it goes, the more likely it is they're going to build. And ultimately, the biggest win is not the tariff. That's a big win. That's a lot of money. But the biggest win is if they move into our country and produce jobs. That's a bigger win than the tariffs themselves.
Trump's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick will meet with Ontario Premier Doug Ford tomorrow to discuss a new trade agreement. The meeting comes after Ford apologized to the American people after suspending a 25% tax on electricity exports to the U.S. after Trump threatened additional tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel. Here's Ford and Lutnick ahead of their meeting.
I thought this was the right decision. They understand how serious we are. We have both agreed let cooler heads prevail. We need to sit down and move this forward.
When you're negotiating with someone and they're not paying attention and they're disagreeing, the president, who's the best deal maker ever to sit in that chair, is going to say, here's my response. And then all of a sudden, shockingly, they respond.
Now, today, President Trump will welcome Ireland's Prime Minister at the White House. Today, he's the first European leader to visit the White House since Ukraine's president visited the Oval Office. Now, the Irish government has been a fierce critic of Israel and led the International Criminal Court case against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, leading the Israeli government to close its embassy in Dublin, guys. So, Carly, maybe keep that body language expert around for this meeting in the Oval Office.
It could be very beneficial. Lucas Tomlinson live for us in Washington. Lucas, thank you so much.
With that, let's bring in Fox News columnist and contributor Liz Peek. Liz, all these foreign leaders talk tough. They saber rattle, wave their fists in the air, say, we're going to come after America. But then they cave to Trump in the end, sometimes like mere hours after they've stuck their chest out and gotten all brave. Isn't that proof that these Trump's tariff will work to achieve his foreign policy goals?
What it really is proof of is that we have an incredibly unbalanced trade situation. In other words, we have a huge import trade deficit, have been in that situation for a very long time, and that is one of the things that Trump is hoping to rectify. Also, we're paying what? We're getting $90 billion a year in tariffs from other countries. We're paying hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs to other countries. So he wants to level the playing field. I think that is a big part of it. And I think he's going to continue for that reason. The second thing is he wants the revenues. He wants to lower taxes and spur manufacturing coming home. And here's the thing that really nobody's talking about. In the past, this would have been an impossible quest, right? Manufacturing's gone down for 22 months in a row up until Trump was elected, and then it began to inch higher. But why have we lost so many manufacturing jobs? Partly because our labor rates are so high compared to Mexico, compared to China. I mean, there's a reason American corporations sent jobs overseas. It's not just tariffs, which are certainly not helping. But now what's happening with AI and this tremendous explosion in technology, we're going to be making more here in the United States at lower cost. So I think that's a tremendously pivotal element in this argument that no one really is talking about, and they should be, because when you're manufacturing cars or widgets or washing machines, boy, does AI help bring down the number of employees I mean, it's not great for workers, but even so, we will be adding jobs, just not as many per unit of output as we used to, probably.
So the big news overnight is the 25% tariff that went into effect on steel and aluminum, not just with Canada, but across the board with all of our trading partners. People hear that, they say that prices are going to go up. What will the impact of that be?
It could be, as Trump has acknowledged, that there will be some minor inflationary aspect of that. Look, what he is doing is short-term pain for long-term gain. And he was totally right. I think one of the most powerful things he said recently was, we are working in this country quarter to quarter. And if you ever have talked to a Chinese businessman or politician, they literally do look 100 years ahead. Wall Street always says, oh, this is terrible. We have to have a long-term view. Now we're taking a long-term view and they're going nuts. So there may be some bump up in inflation, but I also think over the next year, we're going to see trade deals. For example, we should have a trade deal with the UK. There's no reason why they should be tariffing our products and we should be tariffing theirs, right? That seems like a layup. And my guess is, hopefully, over the next year, we're going to negotiate down some of these tariffs in return for better treatment for U.S. companies.
A small but welcome dip in inflation as the markets keep a close eye on the Federal Reserve's next move. The big concern here, the looming refinancing of trillions of dollars in national debt. President Trump, however, says he's not worried about the chances of a recession.
Just specifically on the recession,
Yeah.
do you think there will be a recession?
I don't see it at all. I think this country is going to boom.
And while markets digest tariffs, prices are already coming down for American families. Egg prices have plunged nearly $2. They are lower than when Trump took office. It's a small win, but it does show progress is being made on the affordability crisis. Let's first go straight to Edward Lawrence. He is live for us at the White House. Hi, Edward.
Yeah, and the CPI inflation report came out, showed that cooling, that slight cooling, under 3%, now 2.8%. The core inflation, without food and energy prices, 3.1%, the lowest in about 4 years that we've seen. Now, the Federal Reserve will look at this and they'll say, well, this is a good report, but let's pause and wait. That's the indication. They're going to pause and see how this kind of all plays out here. It's good that there were no increases in this inflation report. Now, the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says this about the report, quote, President Trump is driving down costs through massive deregulation and energy dominance. The entire Trump administration will continue to focus on a fixing the economy and inflation nightmare created by the Biden-Harris administration to unlock the golden age of America. Now, the CPI numbers will not put downward pressure on the markets. The Dow responding to the tariff back and forth that's still playing out, and the president is talking about that right now in the Oval Office. Both Canada and the European Union announced reciprocal tariffs or retaliation tariffs to the 25% steel and aluminum tariffs. The Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick believes the policies unfolding will not cause a spike in inflation. Listen.
Let's start again. Let's take a step back and remember inflation, right? Inflation comes from a government printing too much money. The Biden administration having a $2 trillion deficit. You don't get inflation from having a tariff, because what a tariff says is if it's made in Europe, if it's made foreign, it might cost a little more, but that which is made in America does not cost more.
So while choosing a Tesla to buy yesterday, President Trump telling me that he's bringing about a fundamental shift in this economy. Mr. President, when you look at the market selling off, that didn't concern you, and
Nope,
where do you see it
doesn't
going?
concern me. I think some people are going to make great deals by buying stocks and bonds and all the things they're buying. I think we're going to have an economy that's a real economy, not a fake economy.
Now, the president says he's shifting this economy from one that's reliant on tax money and government spending to one that's relying on the private sector and standing on its own 2 feet.
Massive education cuts causing chaos across the country today after the department slashes nearly half its staff. The downsizing all part of the Trump administration's plan to dismantle the education department altogether, while also targeting schools and colleges with DEI policies. The endgame for parents and local governments to fully control education policy. News Nation's Alina Shirazi joins us now from the Department of Education, where employees have been shut out.
The Department of Education, where I'm standing in front of, was closed today due to security reasons. Yesterday, employees were told to leave at 6 o'clock after work. Now, a lot of reaction across the country. Red states, they're backing President Trump in the move here from the Department of Education, but blue states, not so much. We have some reaction here. Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican of Louisiana, and the chairman of the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, writing on social media that he'd spoken with the Education Secretary and received assurance that cuts would not affect the department's ability to carry out its statutory obligations. When the Department of Education changes were announced, Florida Senator Rick Scott expressing his support for shuttering the agency, saying it should be disbanded. However, now the Democratic U.S. Senator Brian Shaw saying in a statement, quote, people voted for Donald Trump to lower costs and make life more affordable, not to crush their children's futures. Worse, the so-called savings from this absurd move will be shoveled straight in the pockets of billionaires. As for the unions, the president of the American Federation of Teachers saying, quote, trying to abolish it, which, by the way, only Congress can do, sends a message that the president doesn't care about opportunity for all kids. Maybe he cares about it for his own kids or his friends' kids or his donors' kids, but not all kids. And impacted staff will be placed on administrative leave next Friday. They are reportedly supposed to keep continuing getting their benefits and pay for 90 days.
His goal is to have external revenue. You know, the way I think about it, we all are so used to paying taxes. We're so used to it. We have like Stockholm syndrome. You know, don't stop the Internal Revenue Service, God forbid. How about this? The rest of the world leans on our economy, breathes off our economy. Not only is our economy $29 trillion GDP, but we consume $20 trillion a year. We are the buyer of everybody's stuff. We buy everybody's stuff. So who's more important, the people who sell stuff or the people who buy stuff? So we are the buyer of everybody's commodities, products, goods and services. Everything comes from us, right? Let them pay a membership fee. We all understand that model. Let them pay. How about we, you and I, and every single person we know pay less? How about no tax on tips? How about no tax on overtime? How about no Social Security? How about all those things? These are the kind of thoughts that will change America. I know what his goal is. No tax for anybody who makes less than $150,000 a year. That's his goal. And that's what I'm working for.
So you're saying when it looks chaotic and unpredictable from the outside, that there actually is a master plan when it comes to these tariffs?
It is not chaotic. And the only one who thinks it's chaotic is someone who's being silly. He said reciprocal tariffs.
All right, so first off, we just double checked just to make sure. So right now, when we export dairy goods from the United States, from our farms to Canada, we pay a 200% tariff on that. So think about what that does, and then I'll address what Lutnick said. Think about what that does. That it basically makes it so that we really can't sell dairy products in Canada. Because if you're a Canadian and you're looking at cheese, and you're like, boy, I could buy this Wisconsin cheese that's $25 because it's been 200% tariffed to get into the country, or I can just buy Canadian cheese. You're obviously going to buy Canadian cheese, even if you love good old-fashioned Wisconsin American-made cheese. It's just obvious.
Actually, we start off with a post that President Trump put out, 12:30 a.m.?
Yeah,
that brought a little news with it.
Yeah, a late night post here from President Trump, who says that all pardons issued by former President Joe Biden are void. Indeed, just a few short hours ago, Trump took to social media accusing his Democratic predecessor of using an auto pen to sign acts of clemency while in office, rather than doing so by hand, thus declaring Biden's pardons not valid. Additionally, Trump claimed without evidence that Biden failed to give consent for preemptive pardons issued to the 9 House Select Committee members that investigated the January 6th insurrection, along with many others granted clemency on the former president's last full day in office on January 19th. So, John Hyman, a few things need to be said here plainly. There's no authority that gives Donald Trump the ability to overturn his predecessor's pardons. The auto pen argument seems nonsensical, but this is clearly a warning in some way, particularly at those who on the January 6th committee, those who investigated the conduct of Trump and his allies, saying, and I'll just read from his Truth Social post, they should fully understand that they are subject to investigation at the highest level. And at minimum, John, it feels like another moment where Trump might be daring the courts, daring the judiciary. If he tries to see this through, it'll get appealed, and that appeal will be appealed, and eventually some court is going to have to either say yes or no, and we'll see what the administration, if they agree to abide by it.
Yeah, John, there's so, as you said, there are many points to be made here, and it would almost be a joke if it weren't so kind of horrifying. This is consistent with, to your point, the biggest story in our politics, the most foundational story, is this story that you're pointing to, which is the story of Donald Trump continuing to try to enlarge the scope of power that resides in the executive branch and in himself, essentially as something we never had in America before, as a king. And he is seems to be looking for ways to take those challenges to the highest level. It's like he's almost seems to be headed for clashes that he's kind of begging for with the judiciary that would allow him to press against longstanding constitutional and precedential limits so that he can essentially break through those limits and establish effectively a new form of executive-centric government in America.
Well, as we've been reporting, there's no government shutdown this weekend, at least through September.
President Trump signing the spending bill while in West Palm Beach Friday night, just hours after some Democrats in both chambers sided with Republicans. Fox 5's David Kaplan explains how the measure impacts the district.
This was quite a week in the District of Columbia at the local and federal level. At the federal level, they passed this continuing resolution. The government's funded through September. However, in passing that continuing resolution, the District of Columbia government has to cut $1 billion from its current budget because of what some senators called a mistake with this government funding bill. All week, council, the mayor, local leaders warned about cuts that impact you, transit, impacting metro, public safety, education. Right now, again, those cuts are the law of the land. Then Friday, Republican Senator Susan Collins from Maine, as well as Virginia and Maryland's Senate delegations, introduced a fix that would not require D.C. to make these cuts. And that passed the Senate on Friday. There are still steps that need to be taken, but Ward 4 Council member Janice Lewis-George said she is cautiously optimistic that this fix will pass the House and be signed by President Trump.
We've all been up since Sunday evening, organizing nonstop on phone calls, messaging each other, emailing. So we just felt so much relief yesterday. We've never done that as a council. We're saying, you know what, actually, we're canceling all meetings today, and we're all headed to the House of Representatives to try to make something happen.
Let's talk about the House for a second. It's out next week, so this fix might not be taken up until March 24th. D.C. Council Chair Phil Mendelson said we won't know for sure what the House will do until they get back. But on top of an overly supportive Senate vote on Friday, Senator Collins from Maine also said this.
It has been endorsed by President Trump and also by the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, Tom Cole.
Now's our David Kaplan reporting. A source tells Fox 5 that while these cuts are law, during this limbo period, there will not be any major changes to D.C. that are of major concern. D.C. leaders are expected to hold a press conference on the matter tomorrow.
So we're at the Kennedy Center. It needs a lot of work. We're going to fix it, make it beautiful. It's a very big part of the fabric of D.C. and the Capitol. We're bringing back the Capitol. We're bringing back our country. But while we're here, I thought it would be appropriate. We are tomorrow announcing and giving all of the Kennedy files. So people have been waiting for decades for this, and I've instructed my people that are responsible, lots of different people, put together by TULSI GABBARD, and that's going to be released tomorrow. We have a tremendous amount of paper. You've got a lot of reading. I don't believe we're going to redact anything. I said, just don't redact. You can't redact. But we're going to be releasing the JFK files, and that would be tomorrow. Do you have anything else to add to that, Carolyn? So that's a big announcement. They've been waiting for that for decades. Then I said during the campaign I'd do it, and I'm a man of my word. So tomorrow you have the JFK files. What time will they be released? Tomorrow afternoon. Okay.
Have you seen what's in the files? Have you read them?
I've heard about them.
Was there anything interesting?
It's going to be very interesting.
Was there an executive summary supplied to you, Mr. President?
No, I'm not doing summaries. You'll write your own summaries. It's many pages. Is it 80,000 pages? Approximately 80,000 pages. So it's a lot of stuff. And you'll make your own determination.
We bring you some breaking news that President Trump just put out moments ago, ending the Secret Service protection for Hunter Biden immediately, and also others in the Biden family. So let's show you this Truth Social from just moments ago. President Trump saying Hunter Biden has had Secret Service protection for an extended period of time, all paid for by the United States taxpayer. There are as many as 18 people on this detail, which is ridiculous. He is currently vacationing in all places, South Africa, where the human rights of people have been strenuously questioned. Because of this, South Africa has been taken off our list of countries receiving economic and financial assistance. Please be advised that effective immediately, Hunter Biden will no longer receive Secret Service protection. Likewise, Ashley Biden, who has 13 agents, will be taking off the list as well. So again, that's big breaking news just coming from the Truth Social post. We should also tell you that former presidents and their spouses receive lifelong Secret Service protection under federal law, but the protection afforded to their immediate families over the age of 16 ends when they leave office, although both President Trump and President Biden extended the details of their children for 6 months before leaving office there.
Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another great show for you today. It is Thursday by my count, and I am joined by Linda Tran. Nice to see you, Linda.
I'm going to ask you every single week, but did you miss me, Robbie? Because I missed you.
Of course I missed you.
And
I
we're
look
color
forward to
coordinated
Thursday.
as usual.
Yeah, we're not, I don't think we're...
I mean, you know, spring colors.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not...
It's time.
It's not hurting anyone's eyes, hopefully.
What's on your radar, Robbie?
Happy to share with you. Well, the odds of a government shutdown just got a lot higher as Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer declared his caucus is not willing to support the continuing resolution approved by the House to fund the government for another 6 months. Let's watch.
Funding the government should be a bipartisan effort, but Republicans chose a partisan path, drafting their continuing resolution without any input from congressional Democrats. Because of that, Republicans do not have the votes in the Senate to invoke cloture on the House CR. Our caucus is unified on a clean April 11th CR that will keep the government open and give Congress time to negotiate bipartisan legislation that can pass.
In other words, shutdown Schumer is only willing to support a 30-day extension of current government spending levels. Now that's a problem because what the House passed was a 6-month extension. And after passing it, they all left town. So it's very unlikely that the House is going to come back to Washington in the next 48 hours in order to play ball with Chuck Schumer and sign off on the plan that he likes before the funding deadline, which is 12:01 a.m. Saturday night or morning. So unless Schumer is bluffing, the government is going to shut down. To which I say, okay, fine. I mean, look, not really. Obviously, a sudden, abrupt, unplanned shutdown of the federal government is less than ideal. It hurts the economy. It creates inefficiencies. It puts some vital services on hold, or at least makes it more difficult for citizens to take advantage of these vital services. And importantly, it doesn't even end up saving money. I think by some estimations, it costs money. What typically happens is the government employees who are furloughed while the government shuts down, they end up receiving back pay whenever the funding package is eventually agreed to. Now, I want smaller government. Much smaller government. This is not the right way to do it. Even so, one has to sort of marvel at the irony. Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency have been ruthlessly rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse, and keeping President Trump up to date on all sorts of unpopular foreign aid programs that they think he should cut. In response, Democrats have railed at Musk and Trump for cutting government in non-democratic fashion. They say that Elon and Trump have no right to abolish whole departments and engage in mass firing of federal employees and cancellations of various funding schemes. They don't even think Trump should be able to email the federal workforce, to say nothing of the fury over the name 5 things you did today, this week email. The Democratic Party's argument against all of this, of course, is that it's undemocratic and chaotic to reduce the size and scope of the federal government in this matter. And yet, the Democratic Party is willing to let the entire government shut down if they don't get their way, even though they don't control any branches of government. The only way they can do this, obviously, is through the filibuster, which is hardly a cornerstone of democracy. It actually allows the minority party to thwart the will of the majority. Now, again, to be clear, I don't have any problem with that, but it's very contrary to every message we've heard from Democrats since Trump was elected, and since it became clear that he was actually going to take advantage of his mandate and, do things. The day-to-day operations of the federal government are very much under threat right now. It's not Elon Musk who's about to bring it all crashing down. It's Chuck Schumer. So, we're going to do it. We're stopping, we're derailing the government, which I was, assured by Democrats was just this evil project of Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And now Chuck Schumer is willing to do it because that's what's going to happen. They're not all going to come back to Washington to vote on a new package when Chuck Schumer and Democrats are going to be the ones who are blamed for this shutdown, as they all are willing to do. So I don't understand the strategy whatsoever. What is their strategy?
Well, we shall see. I don't think any of us know exactly what's going to happen in the next few days here, but let's be clear about what's happening. So yes, Chuck Schumer and the Democratic Party, members of Congress, are caught between that metaphorical rock and a hard place. And why is that? On the one hand, you have activists and Democratic Party stalwarts who are clearly very upset that they haven't seen vociferous fighting from their elected leaders in Congress, and it's starting to play out here. But on the other hand, members of Congress us on the Democratic side really do care about government. I mean, to your point earlier about the long-standing messaging about keeping government going and essential services, what they're concerned about is pretty legitimate. On the House side of things, what they passed was a $13 billion cut to really, really serious programs, including programs that support farmers, programs that support veterans, programs that support education, for example, that people really, really rely on in this country. And at the same time, increasing your personal favorite, Robbie, $6 billion more for defense spending. So Senator Schumer and his cadre of leaders really have to make a stand against what these are incredibly value conflicted issues that they're going to have to push back against.
Yeah, I personally agree with Thomas Massie, who voted against the entire thing because it just maintains federal spending at the Biden levels, which I thought we elected Republicans to fix that problem. I agree with Senator Rand Paul, who we interviewed on Rising today. It was a great interview. People should go back and watch it if they missed it, who said that it's unthinkable that we, the Republicans who now control the Congress and have the presidency, would continue doing funding at the same level as Democrats, and he supported a rescissions package that actually is not subject to the filibuster. Donald Trump could basically send this spending back to Congress, and then they could do, on a simple majority basis, rescissions to cancel out some of it. Maybe they could still do that. I hope it takes place. But in the meantime, I agree with the small number of Republicans who actually want to enact the America First MAGA agenda that Trump ran on. At the same time, it's just weird to see Democrats are going to end up accomplishing temporarily the same thing.
One day later.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has changed his mind on the House's continuing resolution. Now he says he will vote to keep the government funded through September and avert a midnight shutdown of the government on Friday night. This just one day after saying Democrats were united against the measure. Schumer arguing that a shutdown would further empower President Trump and empower Elon Musk. Watch this.
To have the conflict on the best ground we have, summed up in a sentence, that they're making the middle class pay for tax cuts for billionaires, it's much, much better not to be in the middle of a shutdown, which to divert people from the number one issue we have against these people, which is not only all these cuts, but they're ruining democracy.
It's really not good to see the head of the Democrats in the Senate cursing about their colleagues on the right. I mean, earlier that day, Trump rallied against the shutdown. He voiced his concern for the economy and the American people. Here's the president. Watch.
Well, if they do a shutdown, and ultimately that might lead to very, very high taxes. We're talking about getting to work immediately on the greatest tax bill ever passed. That was the one we did. It was a renewal, and it's an addition to it. And we're going to cut people's taxes. And if we don't open, the Democrats are stopping all of these good things that we're providing. They would really be taking away a lot from our country and from the people of our country.
Well, it's pretty clear that the Democrats are in panic mode given Trump's success. It's sparking infighting among Democrats. New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand reportedly screaming at her colleagues during a private lunch. She was heard down the hall. Apparently, she was screaming loud enough to be heard through the thick wood doors. Fellow Democrats also reportedly are now pushing New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to primary Schumer. They're upset that he's going to vote yes and keep the government open.
Democrat Congressman John Larson really calling out Elon Musk and DOGE for their, what he calls, lack of transparency. Roll tape.
If he's so great, if these plans and all the fraud and abuse that he's found are so evident, why isn't he here explaining it? You know why. Because he's out to privatize Social Security. He's been on television the last couple of days talking exactly about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and what he intends to do. Privatize it.
I didn't hear that. Privatize it. I didn't hear that. Sorry. Anyway, the gentleman on the screen, right-hand side, is the co-chair of the DOGE caucus. His name is Aaron Bean, and he's joining me now. Congressman, are there any plans for Musk to give a full report to Congress on the wasteful spending he's uncovered?
First of all, Stuart Varney, it's great to be with you. I only hope the Academy was watching Representative Larson's performance, because if they were, I think Representative Larson might be nominated for an Academy Award for his dramatic role of just overstating the savings and the efficiencies that Elon Musk has continued to find and what DOGE is doing. It's just a shame. It's almost like this. It's almost like this. Somebody breaks into your house. Elon Musk reviews the videotape, tells you who did it, and you scream, "Oh, you shouldn't have access to the videotape." And that's what the Democrats are just doubling and tripling down on. But as you know, Stuart, because I've watched you, you know we have a government we can't afford, and we have to wean ourselves off of this addictive government spending, and that's what we're doing right now.
Now to the continued concern over federal funding cuts. One of the latest agencies hit is Radio and Television Marti, news agencies responsible for beaming Spanish language news into Cuba, now going dark. Terrell Forney is live in Doral with the latest. Terrell.
And JC, this has been a practice for decades, essentially beaming the truth about current events and other topics right into Cuba. But now all of that is up in the air after every single employee here has been placed on administrative leave, and now reaction is pouring in. The headquarters for Radio and Television Marti have been left vacant after employees were suddenly forced out and the broadcast channels essentially shut down. All this after an executive order signed by President Trump on Friday with the goal of, quote, continuing the reduction of federal bureaucracy.
Hola, Cuba.
The Doral-based stations were originally formed during the Reagan administration to promote democracy overseas, the organization beaming these Spanish-language newscasts directly into Cuba to counter disinformation and provide a direct source of objective journalism to those living on the island. But now that new order requires the office that oversees Marti to be dismantled, along with 6 other bureaus overseen by the U.S. Agency for Global Media, which includes Voice of America.
Like, all that to me says that he's caving when it comes to fighting communism and autocracy.
Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz says that the move will make it harder to combat disinformation.
Closing all that down means that we are willfully further isolating Cubans on the island. That's on top of the fact that we have the regime in Cuba cracking down on freedom fighters, on people who have protested in the streets.
But South Florida's Republican delegation calls it more of a cooling off and evaluation period. In fact, appearing on This Week in South Florida Sunday, Republican Congressman Carlos Jimenez notes that Radio and TV Marti are both baked into a law passed by Congress years ago.
We're not entirely sure what that means for Radio Marti and TV Marti. I think it has to be evaluated, and each agency head is going to do that and then come back with a recommendation. I think the people may be placed on administrative leave for a while, but you can be certain that the 3 Republican members of South Florida will be fighting to maintain effective broadcasting to Cuba.
Trump's purge of the government continues, this time dismantling 7 federal agencies that he has deemed, yet again, unnecessary. So who did Trump go after this time? The president targeted the U.S. Agency for Global Media, which is the parent company of Voice of America, as well as the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars in the Smithsonian Institution, and the Institute of Museum and Library Services, an agency that supports libraries, archives, and museums in every state. He also dismantled the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, which aims to prevent and end homelessness in the U.S. The Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service, an agency focused on preventing, minimizing, and resolving work stoppages and labor disputes. The Community Development Financial Institutions Fund, which aims to expand economic opportunity for underserved communities, and the Minority Business Development Agency, which promotes growth of minority-owned businesses. In the executive order signed on Friday, Trump told the heads of all 7 agencies to eliminate all functions except the bare minimum. The president directed the government entities to be eliminated to the maximum extent consistent with applicable law. insisting they, quote, reduce the performance of their statutory functions and associated personnel. It ordered the heads of each entity to submit a report to the Office of Management and Budget confirming full compliance within 7 days. The fact these agencies are enshrined in law and can't be fully eliminated shows just how far Trump is trying to push the limit with his executive power. Voice of America's parent, the U.S. Agency for Global Media, for example, is congressionally chartered as an independent agency, and Congress passed a law in 2020 intended to limit the power of the agency's presidentially appointed chief executive. The director of Voice of America, Michael Abrahamovitz, wrote in a post on social media that virtually the entire staff had been put on administrative leave, including him. By Saturday morning, many journalists and other employees at Voice of America were informed they were being placed on administrative leave, according to an email reviewed by the New York Times. Journalists there said the cuts were so widespread that they would effectively shut down the international broadcaster. In a statement to USA Today, Caroline Leavitt stated, President Trump is delivering on his promise to make our government more efficient. American taxpayers should not be funding anti-American propaganda in the name of journalism. But here's the kicker. Amid questions over the future of VOA, Trump had picked former Arizona gubernatorial and Senate candidate Kari Lake to lead the outlet. The Trump ally said at the Conservative Political Action Conference last month that the international state media broadcaster won't be, quote, Trump TV under her watch.
A man charged with burning a woman alive on a subway car in Coney Island faces a judge. And News 12's Julia Joseph was inside of the courtroom again for us with the suspected killer. And she has the latest. Julia.
Sebastian Zapeta stood just about 40 feet away from me in court today. He was shackled in handcuffs. He had a fresh haircut, but his demeanor was still the same. He stared directly into the space in front of him for the speedy minute-and-a-half appearance before court officers escorted him right back out. It's hard to forget this horrific murder that the 33-year-old is charged with, lighting 57-year-old Debrina Kawam on fire while she was sleeping on an F train in December. He pled not guilty in January to charges of first-degree murder and arson, actions the prosecution says left Kawam burnt to the point of unrecognition. In the indictment, prosecutors show Zapeta pictures and a video of someone lighting Kawam on fire. When asked who the man is, Zapeta responded, "That's me." During questioning, he also admitted that he has a drinking problem, which overcame him on that fateful December morning. Inside the courtroom this afternoon, the district attorney's office asking Judge Daniel Chun to order Zapeta to provide a new DNA sample.
We want jail time, but he also, in respect of the family, he should be deported.
A local community leader speaking on behalf of Kawam's family today. They've not been in court yet themselves.
Now, that decision by the judge will come on May 7th, whether or not he'll allow the state to collect that additional DNA sample. That date also when Sebastian Zapeta will be back in court. In downtown Brooklyn, Julia Joseph, News 12.
Janice, we embedded with U.S. Border Patrol. They have been targeting people with criminal convictions, mostly sex offenders who have orders to be deported, who have been living in this community for years.
Oh, he's right here in the Circle K.
Yeah. Does he want us to wait till he leaves or get him here?
Yeah,
no, let's get him here.
We're with U.S. Border Patrol, targeting the driver of this blue Mitsubishi. The man in a white hat, identified as Manuel Perez.
He's right there, guys. You're going to need to come with us, so we're going to need you to bring back to the Marathon Border Patrol station.
Perez is a registered sex offender who agents say came here illegally from Cuba years ago.
I know my own criminal history.
Did you ever live in fear that you were going to be deported?
Oh, yes. I've been here 70 years. I got 3 kids. I got 8 grandkids and a great-grandson in here in the United States.
He also has numerous felony convictions, sex crimes with a child, aggravated assault, and drug trafficking.
You can see Mr. Perez is right now being detained. He's in the back of this Border Patrol car. He'll be taken to their facility in Marathon before he's then taken into ICE custody.
He has a lot of stuff in his background, and this is definitely a guy we want to get out of the community.
The work can be dangerous.
Just be careful. This guy has egregious criminal history.
Okay.
Known to carry weapons.
Over the last few weeks, agents have arrested nearly a dozen people in the Florida Keys, mostly convicted sex offenders, as well as this man we've reported on, found guilty of choking and punching a dog, and this career criminal, records show, was convicted of murder. All have orders to be removed from the United States. Later this day, Florida Highway Patrol also pulling over this woman for a traffic violation. Agents say she was on the radar of Immigration and Customs Enforcement here illegally, skipping a court date nearly 10 years ago. Her son arriving, they embrace.
I don't know. He told me he know how to paper or something, no license.
She has a final order removed by a judge, an immigration judge. So at the end of the day, we have no option. We had to apprehend her.
Agents say their focus is still on those with violent criminal histories. They credit partnerships with Monroe County and state law enforcement as well.
With that, those being the people we're going after right now, it's another one off our list and another one we're getting out of the community.
The Trump administration continuing its mass deportation plan after the president invoked the Alien Enemies Act, despite a federal judge blocking that move. The act has been invoked 3 times in history and allows non-citizens to be deported without a hearing. Now, the ruling came down yesterday, ordering President Trump to halt any deportation flights. However, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt announced earlier today that nearly 300 alleged Tren de Aragua gang members have already been deported to El Salvador. News Nation D.C. correspondent Libby Dean live at the nation's capital with the latest. So, Libby, has the president weighed in as of yet?
Kelly, moments ago, President Trump actually breaking his silence on these deportations. Now, in a post on social media, the president not mentioning the federal judge's order to stop the deportations, instead thanking El Salvador for accepting the hundreds of Tren de Aragua, alleged Tren de Aragua members into El Salvador. Now, the president specifically shouting out there in that statement you can see on your screen there, Venezuela's president, thanking him for helping the administration make this happen. Now, the president also posting with that a video showing those deportees arriving in El Salvador. You can see that video there that the president posted. And the Trump administration also, I just spoke with the Trump administration official who is telling me they are claiming they didn't violate the federal judge's order because the flights were actually already over international waters. Now, that official tells me, quote, "We did not defy a court order. The order came too late and illegals were already in international airspace." Now, this is something that's likely going to come up tomorrow when we've got this court hearing all about this. But this is the first we've heard from an administration official, Kelly, saying that they didn't defy this order because the flights were already over international waters when the order came down from that judge yesterday.
All right. What more have administration officials said about these deportations specifically, Libby?
Well, a lot of them have weighed in and they've really applauded the deportations and then also denounced this judge ordering the reversal of these planes. And Attorney General Pam Bondi stating that the judge's order, quote, disregards well-established authority regarding President Trump's power, and it puts the public and law enforcement at risk. That is Pam Bondi there. Now, we also, as I mentioned, I was talking about that court hearing. We've reached out, News Nation's reached out to the courts to find out what the repercussions the Trump administration could face for likely what they claim is defying this order for not turning these flights around like the judge ordered them to do. But we do know that we've got this court hearing tomorrow, so that is going to be something to watch for. But first hearing from the Trump administration that they're claiming they did not violate this order given the flights were already over international waters. So this is going to be something to watch for specifically tomorrow with this court hearing, but really throughout the week as they continue to try and implement their deportation efforts that the Trump administration has focused on weekly.
Hours after President Trump invoked an 18th century wartime law, alleged members of Venezuela's prison gang, Tren de Aragua, arriving in El Salvador. The Salvadorian president sharing this dramatic video on X depicting TDA and MS-13 gang members hauled off into a plane, thrown into a bus, and then their heads shaved as they're now being held in an infamous terrorism confinement center. A senior Trump administration official telling News Nation in total, 261 illegal aliens were deported to El Salvador, of which 137 were deported using that Alien Enemies Act. The timing comes as a federal judge actually blocked deportation flights after Trump invoked that law from 1798. But the Trump administration is firing back now, saying it did not violate that ruling because the planes were already in international airspace. News Nation's Jorge Ventura live in San Diego with what we're learning about those deportations at this hour. Jorge.
Well, Alex, a senior Trump administration official confirming to News Nation that the rap sheets of those illegal aliens deported to El Salvador yesterday do include kidnapping, sexual abuse of a child, robbery, and aggravated assault on a police officer. Now, according to El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele, the country will be receiving 238 suspected Tren gang members and 23 suspected MS-13 gang members who were immediately transferred to the country's mega prison. Footage from El Salvador's government shows a high-security transfer with shackled prisoners stumbling forward as heavily armed officers push them along. The wrists, ankles, and waist are tightly bound, forcing them to shovel in short, restricted steps. On the tarmac, riot police stand shoulder to shoulder, gripping their batons as helicopters hover overhead, scanning for any disturbances. The men are loaded one by one onto special units and military buses, their heads forced down as officers keep them under strict control. Sirens blare as a convoy of armored vehicles, escorted by special forces, transport them straight to the notorious CSOT mega prison, the same facility where El Salvador's government has locked up tens of thousands of gang members in recent years. Inside the prison walls, the men have their heads shaved in assembly line fashion while guards stand over them barking orders. Cameras capture the moment they're wearing white prison uniforms before being marched, hands behind their backs, into tightly packed holding cells. Back in Washington, D.C., a federal judge ruled that deporting migrants without due process violated long-standing U.S. asylum protections. The White House pushing back, saying they didn't violate a court order. Quote, "The order came too late, and illegals were already in international airspace." The El Salvadoran president posting, "Oopsie, too late." His government confirming the inmates will remain in El Salvador with no plans to return them to the U.S. U.S. officials are back in the move. Secretary Marco Rubio called it a fair price for American taxpayers. And for those 137 illegal aliens deported under the Aliens Enemy Act, that does allow the U.S. government to deport those individuals without trial, Alex.
Come on in, it's nice and warm in here.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I'm Ivy.
Ivy.
This is Sky.
Yes, Sky. How you doing?
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
All right. Do you want to go ahead and get ready? Okay.
How you doing?
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Why don't you have a seat right over there, that stool there?
Huh?
Good to see you. Have a seat over there.
Okay.
How you doing?
Good.
Good. What's happening?
Not much.
It's quite a car you got out there.
It is.
Yeah. Fast?
Huh?
Fast?
Fast.
Is it a fast car?
A little bit.
Yeah. Are you here in this country legally?
I'm married.
But are you a U.S. citizen?
I'm fixing my status.
You're trying to become a U.S. citizen. And what country are you from?
Mexico.
Mexico.
Chris Hanson's the host of Takedown. That guy was showing up to see two women?
He was showing up to have sex with a 15-year-old girl who was being sold, trafficked by her older relative.
Oh, boy.
Mother.
All right.
So
and this guy's from Mexico?
He's from Mexico. He worked at a medical center in Birmingham, Alabama, in maintenance. He brought a lot of money, like $4,000, and his shirt, Jesse, said, "Snake in the grass."
These people don't even understand the irony here. Do they even recognize you if they're from Mexico?
Sometimes they do. Now, interestingly, every time we catch an illegal, I like to go back and see what the United States has done for that country, Mexico. From 2001 to 2024, USA gave Mexico $22 billion. That's all in. That's USAID, Homeland Security, the whole thing.
Wow.
Last year, 2024, $185 million. Now, that included $38 million in administrative costs for USAID, as well as $7 million for paying benefits. And get this, we gave them another $7.5 million to help Mexico reduce its carbon emissions to zero.
Oh, wonderful. Did they do that? The answer is no.
No. And we gave them another $5 million for vulnerable people on the move and $10 million to help Mexican workers form labor unions.
Wow. Vulnerable people on the move. That would be Rosie O'Donnell.
Right.
Because I don't know if you heard, she's on the move to Ireland.
Or Everardo, who we caught in Oakland County, Alabama.
Right. One's a pedophile. One is not a patriot. But that's okay. We love you, Rosie, and you're welcome back anytime. El Dorado, whatever your name is, you're not welcome here at all.
And you can see it all on True Blue, my streaming crime network. Watch trueblue.com.
And the podcast.
The podcast is Predators I've Caught.
All right. And we've caught quite a lot.
And we have.
Thank you very much, Chris
Thank you,
Hanson.
Jesse.
Welcome back. President Trump signing an executive memorandum which limits China's access to U.S. markets as part of his America First investment policy. This policy orders the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States to block Chinese investments in sensitive sectors such as technology, energy, and defense. It also looks into new auditing standards while pushing Mexico to impose its own tariffs on Chinese imports. And it aims to limit investment from U.S. pension and endowment funds into Chinese companies. Joining me now is the former Senior Director of International Economic Affairs at the Reagan National Security Council, Roger Robinson Jr., back with us. Roger, great to see you.
Great to see you.
And you were very happy about President Trump's America First investment policy.
I certainly was. I mean, the word of the hour in this country is clarity. And the president certainly brought clarity to how he feels about U.S. investors via our capital markets and private equity funds funneling money into Chinese military-industrial companies. I mean, he couldn't have been starker and clearer. I just have a quick quote or two from the document.
Yes, go ahead.
It says the United States will use all necessary legal instruments to further deter United States persons from investing in the PRC's military-industrial complex. He goes on, the United States will establish new rules to stop United States companies and investors from investing in industries that advance the PRC's national military-civil fusion strategy.
Well, I was so happy to see this as well because you and I have been talking about this for years, literally. We've worked together on the Underwriting the Enemy series for Fox Nation. And this is something that we continually point out, that so many companies that are trading on our exchanges, U.S. exchanges, are Chinese companies that don't even follow the same audit rules that regular companies, American companies do. And they're tied to the PRC. So what do we have happening here? Ordinary investors funding the expansion of America's number one adversary.
Well, that's certainly the case. You know, over the past 25 years, we've seen some 5,000 Chinese companies enter our capital markets. No screening, no diligence, no regulatory oversight, no even interest in whether they're being sanctioned by the United States simultaneously. All manner of corporate bad actors, including the sanctioned variety, as you often pointed out, are in this mix. We're talking about companies that have been implicated in, for example, equipping concentration camps, trafficking in slave labor, aiding and abetting genocide in Xinjiang, the architects of the surveillance state. But the president was really focused on something even more dangerous and insidious, which is our company, those Chinese companies that are directly involved in the manufacturing of advanced weapon systems for China. For example, the hypersonic glide vehicle, the last two aircraft carriers, sixth-generation fighter aircraft, and modernized ICBMs targeting American families, not just military installations.
Well, I mean, I think that President Trump is clear-eyed about China as the number one adversary of America. But, you know, he knows he's got to get along with China. It's the second largest economy. So that's why I think he says things like Xi Jinping is my friend. I get along with Xi Jinping at the same time that he's slapping tariffs on China.
Well, thank goodness that that there's a two-faced event, in a sense, in the best sense of the term, going on here. I think the president is a serious diplomatic fellow, and he knows how to keep these guys on side to the extent that he can. But when it comes to the vital interest of the United States, he's there four square. And one of the most difficult has been the matter of the capital markets and private investor funds. I mean, these have flowed in the trillions of dollars over these 25 years.
Yeah.
And you can just imagine, we wake up in the morning and we wonder, how did they become a near peer competitor to us militarily? here's your answer.
Some of those very go ahead.
Well, the tab's being picked up largely by scores of millions of unwitting American retail investors.
By the way, some of those companies that you're referring to were part of the Chinese spy balloon, right? I mean, their propaganda, their surveillance, all of these tactics from the CCP. But when you're talking specifically about public companies, Wall Street wants that money. Chinese battery company PATEL supplies 37% of the global battery market. It's going to go public. It's looking to raise $7.7 billion in Hong Kong. The company is linked to the Chinese military, obviously. It's putting it on the U.S. entity blacklist, Roger. You say J.P. Morgan, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley are all still lining up behind this company despite a presidential directive against funding blacklisted Chinese companies.
It's another sort of turbulent day here. The volatility has really picked up. We're down another more than 3.5% for the week, almost 10% from the recent highs. I know that you guys have brushed this off, but I do wonder if you're starting to get concerned now that these losses are picking up.
Well, look, Sarah, what we're focused on is we're focused on the real economy. Can we create an environment where there are long-term gains in the market and long-term gains for the American people? I think, having been in the markets for 35 years, I know the market is prone to big unwinds like this. I think we've seen a lot of position unwinding, and I can't really speak to that.
I guess, and this has been consistent with your view, but 62% of Americans own stocks. I mean, it's near 20-year high. So how can the White House not be concerned about hardworking Americans' 401k plans?
Look, Sarah, I didn't say we're not concerned. I'm not concerned about a little bit of volatility over 3 weeks, because if you look over the long term, the reason stocks are a safe and great investment is because you're looking over the long term. If you start looking at micro horizons, stocks become very risky. So we are focused over the medium long term, and I can't tell you that the market is going to go up today, tomorrow, next week, but I can tell you that if we put proper policies in place, it's going to lay the groundwork for both real income gains and job gains and continued asset gains.
When you say that when we're in a period of detox, you used that word on CNBC last week, is that a euphemism for recession?
Not at all. It doesn't have to be, because it'll depend on how quickly the baton gets handed off. Our goal is to have a smooth transition. But I tell you, Sarah, the easy thing for us to have done would have been to come in and just keep this massive spending level going. And it's unsustainable. But could we have kept it going for a year, 2 years, maybe even 4? Maybe, but you're risking a financial calamity. So, we are trying to get this tax bill done. We are controlling expenses. And when we get the tax bill done, so if you can change the trajectory, up revenues, up economic growth, hold expenses flat, or do the unthinkable and cut expenses, then that's a pretty good trajectory on growth. And if we go back to the model in the 90s, that's exactly what happened. We'd see interest rates come down, we'd see the private sector take up the slack from the government. Because right now we have excess employment in the government, and those people can be moved to the private sector.
Treasury yields rising today after softer than expected inflation data and a $39 billion auction of 10-year bonds. For more on the Treasury move and inflation risks, let's bring in Subhadra Rajappa, Societe Generale's head of U.S. rate strategy. Subhadra, great to have you with us.
Thank you.
The markets cheer the softer than expected data, but you say you're not buying into that.
Yeah, because if you look beneath the hood, you get a very different picture. I mean, you look at a broad variety of metrics. I mean, airfares went down, but you saw things like used car prices start to go up. You've seen other categories within the CPI basket, recreation, apparel, all of that went up. So you kind of have this haves and have-not story, if you will. Although the headline was, lower than expected, 0.2 headline and core, overall, I thought that some of these underlying, parts of the basket showed that inflation was still quite sticky.
So, Subhadra, thanks for being here. We haven't seen tariffs yet. How do you factor that into your expectation for rates and inflation?
Not as of yet. I mean, we're still looking for details. We just don't have much by way of information from the administration on what exactly is going to get passed. But if you look at the bond market, I would argue that the bond market is actually looking at somewhat of a softer CPI print, but looking past that and saying, you know what, we haven't really seen the impact of tariffs yet. So once we start seeing the impact of tariffs, that would mean higher inflation prints and a Fed that's going to be on pause for a lot longer. That's part of the reason why you saw the market start to price out cuts that were priced in ahead of the CPI print.
President Trump's first administration, they talked about the stock market being a report card. This one, they seem more focused on the bond market, and they want interest rates to go lower. Treasury Secretary Bessent has talked about it. President Trump. Can they do anything to get bond yields lower?
Well, they can jawbone. For his part, I think Bessent as well has told us very, very clearly that Bessent and Trump don't want 10-year yields going above 4.5%. They want to see borrowing costs contained. They want to see a pickup in the mortgage market. The mortgage market's been pretty much in stasis for a while now, so they really want to see that pick up in these consumer-led areas. And really the way to do that is by keeping 10-year yields low. If 10-year yields get to around 4%, you're going to see a pickup in the mortgage market. That's great for the economy.
Are you tired of paying your property taxes? Well, lawmakers in Pennsylvania and Florida are actually pushing to abolish property taxes altogether. They say you're basically paying rent to the government. So who pays the most in government rent? Well, that would be New Jersey. And who pays the least? That's Alabama. The average level of property taxes paid in the United States was $2,969, a sizable chunk of change. But it's not just property taxes on the chopping block. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick says President Trump wants to eliminate federal income taxes for anyone making less than $150,000 a year. That's 93% of Americans. Okay, Jackie, property taxes. You want them gone?
Okay, I'm a proponent of this, and what I like about it is that it's innovative thinking. I think with President Trump in office for a second term and DOGE and everything he's trying to do that is different and outside of the box, now he's making other lawmakers think that way, whether you're a congressman or you're senator or governor of your state, like Ron DeSantis, who is considering this. People worry that all of a sudden, if you take away the property taxes, then the municipality is going to have to tax you somewhere else to be able to make up the revenue. Some of the suggestions that are being kicked around are not the obvious ones like that, and that is why I like this. Representative Russ Diamond from Pennsylvania is talking about taxing the remittances on these wealthy college endowments. We're going to talk about schools a little bit later in the program. But remember, we've said the endowments were getting taxed at zero. President Trump took it up to 1.4%. We've got a lot of problems with our education system, especially at the high level in this country. You need to be taxing those endowments more. So you're going to lower my property taxes and tax the endowments. I'm in favor of that. And that's just one innovative example. I like how they're thinking.
Taylor, are you on Team Jackie here?
50-50. Love lower.
Can't be 50-50.
Love lower taxes. Taxation is theft. Lower the taxes. Here's my worry. If I'm in Florida and I don't have income tax, the government gets its revenue from sales and property tax. So now you're cutting property and I have no income tax. Now I'm relying on sales tax. And then what? I mean, so I hear you that, look, you think you own your home, try not paying your taxes and the government owns your home. Guess what? You don't. But the alternative, if I don't live in an area with a big high endowment that can offset that loss of revenue, I don't know where else you get the revenue except for then sales
I'm gonna give
or
you
income.
A counterbalance here.
But what if you're doging and you find a lot of savings?
I love this one. Trickle down Doge. I think this is
doging? I just like that we say that. What if you're doging?
Look, I'm a big proponent of trickle down Doge going at the state level. But here, let me give you this. In Florida alone, the median home price 5 years ago, right before COVID, was $263,000. Today, $435,000. That's an increase in the tax base of about 65%, if you just consider things all equal. That's municipalities getting a 65% increase in their tax base, essentially, right? You can cut back some and not cut off essential services. But I do think you have to worry about the sneaking up with sales taxes.
What this also pushes in terms of cutting spending are education savings accounts, which are much cheaper than the way they run the public school system, government-run school system. You can get a good education, the fraction of the cost today. Go to that, and kids will get a better education, and the unions won't be able to hurt the children and euchre the taxpayers.
This brings it back around to Jackie's. This is innovation, and this is a good thing. It might not be the right thing to do, but it might spur on an idea that is a good thing.
It's interesting. Let's talk about it. It seems to be like there's a lot of places that they're finding money, and if they can offset taking it from you, it might not be the worst thing.
All right, we've been talking about it, right? The soft data headlines, they've been moving this market like a pinball, right? But hard data, it's been mostly good. I mean, retail sales, inflation, it's been steady as she goes. Now, the debate, of course, is how inflationary tariffs will ultimately be, how inflationary the migration policies will ultimately be for this market. And on that score, you probably haven't heard a lot about egg prices lately. Believe it or not, they have pulled back a lot, which is probably why you haven't heard from them. They're well below where they were at the inauguration. I'm going to bring in now two of the smartest guys I know. Renmac, head of economic research, Neil Dooda, along with Academic Securities, head of macro strategy, Peter Scher. Guys, I'm glad you know each other very well. So this is not about eggs per se, but eggs are considered inelastic. Usually higher prices doesn't mean much in terms of demand, but it feels like even eggs found a level that people said, no, I'm not going to pay you $9 for a carton of eggs. And if it can happen to eggs, I wonder how easily, Neil, will they be able to pass prices on? Like, you hear folks talk about, like, okay, the tariffs are simply going to be passed on to consumers. I'm not buying it.
Well, I don't either, but I think the administration, Charles, had a really interesting plan for eggs, which is just let the chickens hatch and now we're reaping the windfall of that. And as you mentioned, I think it's interesting that nobody's talking about it. But remember, for your listeners, that's going to take, 30-40% drop in egg prices is probably going to take about a tenth off of headline inflation in a month. So that's a pretty big move for one category. But I agree with you that, look, consumer incomes are slowing down. Right. So companies won't be able to just pass on higher prices. Right. They're going to have to eat the cost. The only company, Pete, I heard that really was confident about it was AutoZone. I guess maybe the average car is 14 years old, so you know what? You got to fix the jalopy. You got to fix it. But other than that, it's, someone's going to a lot of folks are going to have to eat this along the way.
Yeah, I think the people who are exporting are probably going to eat some of it. I don't think as much as they did during Trump 1.0, where China certainly ate a lot of it. And I think it's going to be very product specific. So, you have certain qualities of steel that really aren't produced in the U.S. They will probably try and pass that on because there is no U.S. alternative. And I think that's going to be really the battleground. Are the tariffs enough to make the U.S. competitive? Do we have the spare capacity? Where it's good, we move on.
Well, a wild scuffle at a gas station has landed 3 people behind bars. That fight was over a prom dress, and it all got caught on video. Fox 5's Kevin Stewart is live near Norcross in Gwinnett County with that video, Kevin, and the story behind it.
Yeah, Christine, I want you to take a look. You see these cameras back here at the racetrack? They caught the whole thing. This was the meeting spot off of Beaver Ruin Road. The victim here is 18 years old. She was selling the dress, and she's 5 feet, 102 pounds. That's worth noting because just take a look. Watch this. Bargain hunting gone bad. That's the young woman selling the prom dress, tossing another young woman to the ground after several earlier struggles.
I would say it's not something we normally have to investigate. It's, an argument over a prom dress.
Now, this whole thing started going haywire when the buyer of the dress wanted to try it on right here at the gas station. So she and the seller walked inside the gas station to go inside the bathroom to try it on. But she was met by another young woman who grabbed the dress and started running right here by the gas pumps.
Some kind of argument or discussion over the money involved or the payment ensued.
Here you see there's a group now, including the seller's boyfriend. He managed to get the dress back, but the gas station surveillance camera shows how this whole thing flared up, leading to the body slam.
You can see the victim there being choked from behind, the other individual had her arms around her somewhere, and I guess tight enough that she was able to still get out of it by flipping her over.
In the end, Morgan Flincham, the buyer, is charged with battery and theft by taking. Layla DeJager is charged with battery and theft by taking, and Kelly George is charged with theft by taking.
What a bunch of dumbasses. Yeah, really.
From the Daily Mail, yo, check this out. Leaked audio of DEI activist sharing air traffic controller exam answers with minority candidates. This is wild, and they really bury the lead. So I want to give a heartfelt do better, Daily Mail. They go on to say, in audio footage, and you scroll down, Shelton Snow, the frontline manager for the National Black Coalition of Federal Aviation Employees, can be heard promising advance access to test answers to minority prospects vying for an air traffic control job in 2014. Holy crap. The funny thing is, they call him an activist, a top activist. Like, heavens me, Daily Mail, can you at least, actually tell people in the lead he's the frontline manager for the National Black Coalition of Federal Aviation Employees? Because that makes it a bit more serious than some random guy in the street being like, let me get you some answers. That boy is good. Mm-hmm. When it turns out he's part of an organization trying to advance this specifically, and then you've got leaked audio where he's basically helping people cheat, they say. The question then becomes, how many people are air traffic controllers who don't actually know how to do it, but were given advanced answers by people like this?
Why do they need to cheat and have preferential hiring? Like, if you've got preferential hiring, why do you need to cheat as well?
I think
you're already cheating.
It's the other way around.
What do you mean?
That despite the fact that these people are being given preferential treatment, they're still not getting in.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's part of the whole merit problem. When you're just seeking out colored people in order to fill these jobs, and you're not looking at merit, you're going to have to help them out in some way in order to get them there.
You can't say that anymore. It's people of color.
Oh,
I know there's a distinction for some reason. I haven't figured out how or why. But
I don't believe there's a distinction anymore.
But it's okay because you're Native American, so you can't be racist.
Yeah, you're a piece.
There we go.
I was thinking the
Problem
other
solved.
night about that. I was like, is my skin dark enough? Like all these people, like anyone going through this like color issue, like a woman of color, like, oh, it's just not colorful enough. I'm like, what is this grotesque mind racism virus?
I mean,
thing? It's so weird.
I'm quite pasty myself, but you actually have a nice pink hue.
Thanks, sir. That's probably blood flow from all the caffeine I've been drinking.
Maybe.
Actually, caffeine constricts the blood vessels.
Right. Does it like squeeze it and then make it shoot faster?
No,
That's how I feel right now.
So you would be less pink.
I feel
Unless
like
Ian is
like the
typically just
DEI
bright
hire.
red.
Maybe it's just the red jacket and the yellow. What were you saying?
Could be the hair.
Yeah.
I feel like the DEI hire of this podcast right now, just surrounded by white people.
Well, I'm actually mixed, so.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's true.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, I'm half white as well, so yeah.
Uh-oh. So you're only half minority.
Yep.
That means that past comment might get you in half trouble.
Their plan. A local. We start that interview with something really minor.
To deport undocumented Venezuelans that the administration say are dangerous individuals with ties to the gang Tren de Aragua. That gang is obviously associated with a lot of crime, human trafficking, drug dealing, theft, shootings, including in your state of Texas, right outside of your congressional district. Do you agree with this? And if not, what's your issue with the U.S. using any tool at its disposal to remove undocumented violent people from this country?
Well, my argument is that we already have tools that are available to remove undocumented violent people from our country. And so the idea that you want to go into a zombie law, this is kind of like what we saw in Arizona when they decided to revive a zombie law around abortion. It is the fact that we can't trust this administration to actually use a scalpel, but instead they love to use a butcher knife on things. And so giving them this wide latitude to just kind of go across and just claim that anybody is anything is wrong. And so we do have courts, we do have processes, we do have laws,
and we should just go ahead and use those. There's a reason that nobody else has decided to go back into Adam's times in order to try to find ways to make sure that we can keep our country safe.
When you first saw that insane fight that broke out in the Oval Office, you may have thought it's over. No more room for diplomacy involving Ukraine and the United States. This is a complete disaster. However, some positive updates to report here. Thankfully, the two countries have continued to negotiate for a ceasefire, and there are some positive updates in regard to a ceasefire. Now, the good news is that Ukraine has agreed to a ceasefire proposal that has been promoted and endorsed by the United States. But the bad news is, honestly, as could have been predicted, Russia has yet to sign onto that proposal, and Trump is not happy about it. So we'll get to the Russia part of this in just a second. But first, let's actually talk about what the ceasefire proposal contains and what it would mean moving forward if Russia agrees to the ceasefire proposal. So it would end all fighting for 30 days. Interestingly, Ukrainian officials initially did not want to stop all fighting. They only wanted to stop aerial and sea-based long-range attacks. But at the end of the day, they finally agreed to all fighting stops for 30 days. And then after that, once that 30 days is up, they're still negotiating a longer term ceasefire during that time, and they could extend it based on a mutual agreement of all parties. Now, unsurprisingly, the 30-day pause in fighting does not include any security guarantees from the United States. And the Trump administration has also continued ruling out the notion that Ukraine be part of NATO. Now, and by the way, if the Trump administration came out and said, no, we support Ukraine's right to be part of NATO, well, it's going to be impossible to get Russia to the negotiating table. So I don't necessarily begrudge the Trump administration for overtly saying that. But I also think that the Trump administration has no interest in allowing Ukraine to join NATO. So that's just how I view the whole matter. But the proposal does include some interesting details. So the two countries agreed to conclude as soon as possible a comprehensive agreement for developing Ukraine's critical mineral resources to expand Ukraine's economy and guarantee Ukraine's long-term prosperity and security. And when we talk about the two countries here, we're talking about the United States and Ukraine. We are not talking about Russia and Ukraine, obviously. Now, there was a little bit of stenography happening there with the Washington Post, because fact of the matter is this is going to be an economic deal that obviously benefits corporate interests here in the United States, business interests here in the United States as well. So let's not forget that. As a result of Ukraine agreeing to this ceasefire, the Trump administration has lifted the pause that they had implemented on US military aid to Ukraine. So those weapons, that military aid has begun flowing into Ukraine once again. And the US still has almost $4 billion worth of military equipment available for Ukraine, which will now be sent overseas. And on top of that, the US has has resumed sharing intelligence with Ukraine. When Trump put that pause on our assistance to Ukraine, it not only had to do with military assistance, it also had to do with intel. Now, Zelensky called the negotiations positive and constructive, saying that we're not planning on playing with the narrative that we don't want to end the war, that Russia is spreading all over the world. For me, it's important to end the war. I want the president of the United States to see this, for Americans to see this and to feel this. And by the way, he also thanked Americans again and again in recent statements, obviously attempting to placate the likes of Vice President J.D. Vance. Now, Senator Lindsey Graham was calling for Zelensky to step down as president of Ukraine following that Oval Office blowup between Zelensky, Trump, and Vance. Well, now he's singing a completely different tune. And by the way, I just want to tell you something that at the time that we reported the story, I didn't know, but now I have more clarity on it. So apparently, the Oval Office meeting and the parameters of the negotiation and all of that that was partly negotiated with the involvement of Senator Lindsey Graham. So when things blew up, he was worried that, like, he was going to get decapitated, obviously not literally, but he was worried that it was going to ricochet back onto him and it was going to hurt him politically. But now all of a sudden, you have Zelensky sign on to this ceasefire deal, and Senator Lindsey Graham is singing a completely different tune on Zelensky, saying, "It is clear to me that President Zelensky is willing to make peace." As Secretary Rubio said, the ball is now in Russia's court. I'm extremely skeptical that Russia will accept the ceasefire, and I am very doubtful they want to end this war. Zelensky has passed the test of wanting peace. It is now up to Putin to show his cards. And Graham also said that he will be introducing legislation by the end of the week that would implement even harsher sanctions against Russia. Now, the other thing I want to just quickly note is there is some hope. Okay, I don't want to be too optimistic, but there is some hope that Russia could sign on, in the very least, for that 30-day pause in fighting. And the reason why I say that is because, believe it or not, they keep referencing the friendly relationship that they have with Trump, and they don't want to ruin that relationship. So they're catching wind of Trump being very upset that Russia has yet to sign on to this ceasefire deal. And so they know that whatever diplomatic ties they have to the United States through Donald Trump could be absolutely destroyed if they don't play ball here. Will they play ball? That remains to be seen. So we're going to wait and see for that.
Vladimir Putin is asked what the world has waited 2 days to find out. Will he accept the US-Ukraine 30-day ceasefire plan?
We agree with the proposals to cease hostilities.
A positive-sounding answer at first, but there are conditions.
This cessation should lead to long-term peace and would eliminate the original causes of this crisis.
Those causes include the possibility of Ukraine joining NATO, which the US now says is off the table. But there is also Putin's false claim Ukraine is led by neo-Nazis. He knows there is little prospect of a changing government in Ukraine in the near future.
Putin's maximalist demands in Ukraine have not changed. He wants to destroy Ukraine as a country, and he does not want it to become part of NATO and the European Union.
Then there is the timing of this peace proposal. Putin's troops are retaking much of the Russian land occupied by Ukraine since last year, an advantage he will want to press home. Putin visited the region Wednesday.
Who will figure out how and when the ceasefire is broken? These are many of the questions that need to be analyzed carefully.
Putin met with Washington's special envoy Thursday, and the Russian president says he is prepared to speak with his US counterpart directly.
No, he put out a very promising statement, but it wasn't complete. And yeah, I'd love to meet with him or talk to him. But we have to get it over with fast. Every day people are being killed.
Vladimir Zelensky called Putin's response predictable and said the Russian leader is just afraid to tell Trump directly that he wants to keep the war going.
Sealed with a phone call? Well, the US president says he thinks there is, in his words, a very good chance he can broker an end to the war between Russia and Ukraine in a phone call with Vladimir Putin scheduled tomorrow. The Kremlin confirming just hours ago that that call will happen. In comments on Sunday, Donald Trump indicated the focus of the call will be about land concessions, potentially the biggest obstacle to reaching a ceasefire.
We're speaking to President Putin on Tuesday. I think we'll, be talking about land. It's a lot of land. It's a lot different than it was before the wars, And we'll be talking about land. We'll be talking about power plants. That's up, that's a big question. But I think we have a lot of it already discussed very much by both sides.
Busy flight, that. Well, exactly how the Russian president will respond is anyone's guess. In a news conference last week, Putin laid out tough conditions and demanded concessions from Kyiv before accepting the US peace plan. Well, CNN's Claire Sebastian joining us now from London. Elena Treen is at the White House. And Claire, we've just in the last few hours heard from the Kremlin that this call will happen. What are the expectations on the part of Vladimir Putin? in what he might get out of this?
Well, Becky, I think this is potentially a unnerving, if not perilous, moment for Ukraine, right? Because Ukraine had a very positive week last week after the talks in Saudi Arabia. US military aid was restored. It seemed like their relationship with their biggest backer was getting back on track. I think for Putin, this call this week represents an opportunity to reverse some of that progress, to try to drive a wedge again between the US and Ukraine. Don't forget, after the last time they spoke back on February 12th, it was a few days later, and of course we cannot prove causality here, but it was a few days later that we started to hear rhetoric coming from President Trump calling President Zelensky a dictator, and then we had that cascade of events that led up to the Oval Office meeting. So that is one aspect for Ukraine to keep an eye on, and of course Ukraine's European allies, the foreign ministers of which are meeting in Brussels today and are clearly, from the commentary that we heard from them going into that meeting, trying to reiterate the point that of course it is Russia, not Ukraine at this point, standing in the way of peace. But look, President Trump seems to be suggesting that a lot of work has been done ahead of this call, that there was work done over the weekend. He may have something to announce, but hedging again, he said, on whether they can end this war. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. So I think for now, Russia is keeping officially its commentary very light, not commenting at all on what it expects from this meeting.
We're learning more about a wild shootout that may be connected to the federal corruption case involving former Oakland Mayor Sheng Tao and others.
Yes, we are hearing from the man targeted in that shooting and a neighbor who saw it all happen.
New at 6, ABC 7 News I-Team reporter Dan Noyes is here with the story. Dan.
Well, Dan and Ama, Mario Juarez is in a difficult place. He can't speak out because he could be a witness in that federal corruption case against former Mayor Sheng Tao and others. Still, he wants to know why police arrested 2 suspects in December for the shooting at his home, but released them without warning him.
You can still see a bullet hole in the rain gutter at Mario Juarez's house in the Fruitvale neighborhood, 9 months after the shootout.
And then it stopped there and it shot like 2 times.
Sheila Campos lives across the street. She tells me she was headed to work after 9 p.m. when she saw a car drive by 3 times, firing at Juarez's house and Suburban. On the last pass, Mario Juarez came outside with his .40 caliber Glock.
And he started shooting back, like firing back, pa, 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 pa. And the car just kind of skeeted off, but kind of fast. And he was in the middle of the street shooting, like trying to get him.
I've been speaking to Mario Juarez by an encrypted phone app. He tells me he can't be in Oakland right now because he still fears for his life.
He sent a written statement first reported by the San Francisco Chronicle that says 2 suspects were nabbed in December 2024 tied to these attacks, but justice, it never came. Oakland police made the arrests, but the DA's office, just days after Pamela Price left office because of the recall, allowed the suspects to walk without charges and without informing Juarez that the men who may have shot at him were back on the streets.
It's an issue of safety, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's definitely an issue of safety.
Ernie Castillo is Mario Juarez's attorney.
When you have people come into your house and you get into a shootout and people shoot at you, that's a huge concern. So we should have been notified by that former administration 100%.
Mario Juarez recently had a fraud case against him dropped. He was accused of bouncing checks for a mailer that supported Sheng Tao in her race for mayor. As part of that case, Juarez accused then District Attorney Pamela Price of demanding $25,000 from him to help her recall, saying when he refused, she filed the criminal case against him.
In that motion were declarations and statements by witnesses, including Mario Juarez, that the former administration had tried to shake down Mario for $25,000. And if he had not contributed to that campaign for $25,000, then they would charge him.
Through her attorneys, Price denied asking Juarez for money. Back to the shooting in June, neighbors confirmed to me that the day after the gunfire, the FBI canvassed the neighborhood looking for witnesses and surveillance video. And just 10 days later, agents raided the homes of then Mayor Sheng Tao, her partner Andre Jones, and David and Andy DeWong, owners of California Waste Solutions. They're all charged with conspiracy, bribery, mail-in wire fraud, and more. Federal prosecutors also claim Tao agreed to purchase modular units for the homeless from Evolutionary Homes, a company run by the DeWongs and Mario Juarez.
The product that we have is a single-family resident home.
Though he is not named in the indictment, Juarez appears to be unindicted co-conspirator one who acted as a go-between for the DeWongs and Sheng Tao. Now Mario Juarez says they saw me as a threat, not because I'm perfect, because I wouldn't bow. They wanted me dead to keep their secrets safe, to silence a voice that wouldn't shut up. They picked the wrong man.
Was Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard right about Syria, which is currently experiencing very severe violence? The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says that 1,300 people have died, including 1,000 civilians.
Militias affiliated with Syria's new government, led by Ahmad al-Sharaa, have killed most of the 1,000 civilians, at least according to the observatory. The United Nations said yesterday that sectarianism was appearing to be driving the unrest and civilian killings. The country has been undergoing a civil war for 14 years.
Why all of this violence now, you ask? Well, of course, in December, rebel forces overthrew the country's 13-year leader, Bashar al-Assad. Now, in the past, critics have smeared Gabbard as an Assad apologist and sympathizer throughout her career. Some of her warnings about what might happen if Assad were toppled, I think, are proving to be true. Here she was in January during her confirmation hearing.
I shed no tears for the fall of the Assad regime, but today we have an Islamist extremist who is now in charge of Syria, as I said, who danced on the streets to celebrate the 9/11 attack, who ruled over Idlib with an Islamist extremist governance, and who has already begun to persecute and kill and arrest religious minorities like Christians in Syria.
I understand.
Why that should be acceptable to anyone is beyond me.
It
is
be.
certainly
and
not in our interests.
Greek Foreign Minister Georgios Geropetris told Fox News Digital that Europe and the U.S. need to be cautious of this new regime. Unless the new government includes religious minorities in governance, then the international community will have to keep the sanctions. It's also a clip from Trump in 2015 talking about the Syrian conflict. Here he was.
The problem is the other side of Assad. We have no idea who they are. They probably are ISIS. I'm saying, are we better off with Assad? We have no idea who these people are. We give them weapons, we give them ammunition, we give them everything. Aaron, we have no idea who. I mean, maybe it's worse than Assad. So what are we doing? Why are we involved?
Now the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, which the United States does back, they came to an agreement with the new government this week. That deal would integrate all civil and military institutions into the new Syria. Secretary of State Marco Rubio welcomed that deal, said the U.S. supports a credible, non-sectarian government. I wanted to discuss this, Marianne, because, people like Tulsi and others, get smeared as being in league with or apologizing for, dictator like Assad. No, Assad, very bad man. No, just like she said, no one is shedding tears. The violence and murder that he was responsible for is terrible. But how many times do we have to learn the lesson that we get involved, we contribute to to regime change in one of these Middle Eastern countries, and the outcome ends up being worse? That's exactly what we discovered in Iraq, in Libya, where ISIS was, marching through the streets afterwards, terrorists that want to kill Americans, that inspire attacks against Americans within our own country. ISIS has the power to do that, not, Assad or Gaddafi or Hussein. I'm under no, illusions about these individuals, but we have to be clear-eyed about what is within the realm of possibility and the violence we are seeing. Marianne, we spoke to an expert on Syria on Monday, Niall and I did, who has family there, describing scenes of absolute horror of family members hiding in their villages, hiding in the mountains, hiding behind bushes as these violent terrorist militias come through, kill all the men, steal all their things, and move on to the next town. This is horrifying.
Everything that Tulsi said there was absolutely correct. And the scenes of horror, people being killed in churches, machetes, beheadings, it's all absolutely disgusting. Now let's remember, Assad was also known for violence against his own people. So I think the criticism of Tulsi was that she was treating him with respect, almost like he was some good guy. It was a bad guy versus bad people. And there's to some extent what the president was saying there as well. At the same time, I don't think it's correct to compare this to something like Libya. This was not an actual declared regime change. This is just, the Syrian people are brilliant people. This is just one of the great tragedies. And people like even like when you started just now, she was smeared. I think there's some things we just need to talk about in the sense of what are we going to do? What can we do as Americans? Not every conversation has to be contextualized, even for the sake of good TV. Not every conversation needs to be contextualized as in, well, you guys, especially since the past is the past. And I just hope, I think TULSI has it right. And I hope that she and the president, for the sake of the Syrian people, can come up with policies that hopefully will be helpful at this tragic, tragic time.
Joining me now, Department of Education Secretary Linda McMahon. Madam Secretary, great to have you in studio today. All right. First, welcome to the show, because you haven't been on in studio with me before. Now, is this the first step on the road to a total shutdown?
Yes, actually it is, because that was the president's mandate, his directive to me, clearly is to shut down the Department of Education, which we know we'll have to work with Congress, to get that accomplished. But what we did today was to take the first step of eliminating what I think is bureaucratic bloat. And that's not to say that a lot of the folks, it's a humanitarian thing too. A lot of the folks that are there, they're out of a job. But we wanted to make sure that we kept all of the right people and the good people to make sure that the outward-facing programs, the grants, the appropriations that come from Congress, all of that are being met. And none of that's going to fall through the cracks.
So that was my next question. So the criteria for keeping that 50% is related to expenditures and key programs?
Correct. Congress appropriates the money that is going through Title I to IDEA programs.
What's that stand for?
Do you know what? I'm not sure I can tell you exactly what it stands for, except that it's the programs for disabled and needs.
Individuals with Disabilities Act, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm guessing. I don't know. I don't know all my acronyms. I've been here for 30 years.
This is my 5th day on the job, and I'm really trying to learn them very quickly.
Right, it's a lot. So reports today said that the buildings were going to be closed for security reasons. What does that mean?
Well, when people left today and they got their notification to take their laptops and their phones home with them, and we didn't want part of the people who were being permanently let go and those who are remaining to some of them show up to work tomorrow morning.
That's standard corporate practice.
So it's just standard corporate practice that we just locked the doors and said, for those that are coming back, will know that they'll be coming back on Thursday morning.
Were people given a chance to take any personal effects?
They were told that they will be allowed to come back. We would arrange for them to come back and take their personal effects with them, and to say goodbye to some folks too.
Randy Weingarten, you're shocked. I know you two are catching dinner in about 20 minutes, but she actually commented about what's going on here. Watch.
Think about a country whose president basically says, I'm getting rid of education. What does that say about the future? So many people are so mad about it because they're just taking opportunity away from kids that don't have it. So kids of billionaires, they have it.
Let's stay on the facts.
Sorry.
No,
I'm
do
really
not apologize.
angry about this.
No, because this
I'm
is what
really
people
angry.
need to...
Your reaction?
Well, clearly we're not taking away education. The president never said that. He's taken the bureaucracy out of education so that more money flows to the states. Better education is closest to the kids, with parents, with local superintendents, with local school boards. I think we'll see our scores go up with our students when we can educate them with parental input as well.
Well, she's very angry. And over the weekend, I posted on X that it would be nice if Randy were ever angry about the abysmal 8th grade and 4th grade reading and math proficiency. You see those numbers, like 18%, 22% of proficiency or above? In 4th and 8th grade, we rank near the bottom globally on these standards. Well, it's shocking, given how much, and we're putting up a graphic, given how much we spend. I can't even, it's terrible.
Well, I'll tell you, it's unbelievable. And when you think about high school seniors that are graduating, only 30% of them are reading proficiently. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't read words, but they can't read cognitively. And that's what we're missing. You read to learn up until 3rd grade, and then after that, you're learning to read up until the end of 3rd grade, then you're reading to learn. And if you can't read after the end of 3rd grade, you're going to be behind in your reading. And so that's what we have to focus on.
And it really is a unique experience to be able to be a part of the team that is delivering a singular system of justice for the American people, with a complete and total annihilation of the weaponization of justice and the politicization of intelligence. We have a new FBI, and I'm humbled and honored to be its leader. We have a courageous Attorney General in General Pam Bondi. We have incredible leaders throughout our law enforcement community, whether it be at the FBI, the DEA, HSI, CBP, ATF, and the list goes on. I've been privileged to meet so many of them in my first month on board here. I look around and I see state attorneys generals that have been doing the work hand in glove with local, state, and federal law enforcement. And our mission, and my mission specifically, is to tell you what we've been doing in this first month. And I told you when I got this job that we would crush violent crime, that we would take the fight to anyone who wishes to do harm to our way of life and to hurt our citizenry, that we would go to the ends of the earth to bring them back to face American justice produced right here in this very hall, in this very building. To that effort, we have done just that. And a special shout out, I know my Boston contingent is here on St. Paddy's Day. Thank you for the great work you guys have been doing and across the rest of the FBI. But right here in Virginia, or across the river in Virginia, the FBI stood up an interagency task force at our Manassas office, and in just 2.5 short weeks, we have arrested over 300 violent felonies, gang members, including MS-13 and 18 gangsters. We have taken seizure of hundreds of pounds of narcotics and hundreds of weapons and currency and illicit goods. That's just what you can do when you put the brave men and women of law enforcement in one room and get the hell out of their way.
Well, over a dozen online sex predators are arrested in Seguin. The Guadalupe County Sheriff's Office working with multiple agencies on an operation that lasted 3 days.
And tonight, Ken's 5's Rania Kaur spoke with investigators.
In some instances, those online sex predators were trying to target a minor. The Guadalupe County Sheriff's Office telling me they were also able to rescue 2 human trafficking victims. Over the course of 3 days, 14 online sex predators were arrested in Seguin.
You know, really, they come in all shapes and sizes, right? I think they're exploiting the most vulnerable people in our society, not only children, but just trafficking victims.
The operation conducted by Guadalupe County Sheriff's Office in combination with 9 different agencies. Guadalupe County Sheriff Joshua Ray says, in some instances, those predators believed they were talking to minors when they were actually talking to a detective.
I can basically tell you that it was a location that they were coming to solicit the type of activities that they were trying to encounter in, which of course were illegal. And we were prepared to apprehend them when they came.
The suspects, all men, trying to target women, in some cases as young as 14 years old.
There's a couple different methods and ways that they can do it. It's through social media, it's through different applications, it's through individual websites.
The issue is a priority and is personal to the sheriff.
Our point of emphasis is the child predators, but we also catch sexual predators in general within the net of the investigation.
Sheriff Ray says they're not going to stop here. They're going to continue conducting operations like this all across Guadalupe County. In Seguin, I'm Rania Kaur, Ken's 5.
What did Germany know about COVID's origins, and when did they know it? According to the German spy agency BND, the nation has been sitting on its own conclusion that COVID-19 did in fact originate from a lab in Wuhan, and that they had known that since 2020. 2 German news publications jointly reported that BND was privy to information that the Wuhan Institute of Virology had conducted gain-of-function research modifying viruses to be more transmissible to humans. The report also reveals BND knew about the lab's safety violations.
According to those papers, BND finally shared its assessment with the CIA last fall. In January, the CIA in turn conceded that it is more likely that COVID came from a lab than a nature spillover. The agency, however, still says it has low confidence in any definitive explanation. Now, the New York Times published an op-ed over the weekend titled, "We were badly misled about the event that changed our lives." And that not only acknowledged that there is, quote, no strong evidence ruling out a lab leak, but that there were attempts made to squelch legitimate debate on that point.
Civil liberties and free speech attorney Jenin Younes wrote on X, quote, "A miracle has happened." The New York Times ran an op-ed acknowledging not only that the COVID virus likely originated in a lab, but that government officials and scientists conspired to keep substantiating evidence secret. The lab leak theory was censored on social media because of pressure from the administration. We shouldn't have done it. Chris Martinson posted, quote, "I despise writing in the passive voice to try and blunt the message, so I rewrote the New York Times headline. Yes, COVID came from a lab. Yes, Fauci and many prominent Western virologists conspired to hide that from the public. No, nobody has been arrested." Joining us now to weigh in the latest revelations is Alina Chan, a Boston-based scientist and co-author of Viral, The Search for the Origins of COVID-19. Welcome back to Rising, Alina.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we always love talking with you, and I saw you just commenting on social media that, usually in cases of massive horror and death and destruction that maybe the government had some knowledge of or should have worked harder to prevent, or we should just kind of try to understand what's going on. There's usually an independent investigation. Has that happened in this case, and is the reason there has not been an independent investigation because the U.S. government or its own health advisors will become like they look complicit in what happened?
So I think this was laid out very clearly in the New York Times opinion piece, that it wasn't just that the U.S. couldn't investigate. It was actually that leading scientists and politicians in the West, in the U.S. and Europe, were shutting down the lab leak hypothesis as a conspiracy theory. So it wasn't that there was no means to investigate. It was that the scientists were telling us not to investigate. They were telling us it was case closed, that no lab-based scenario was plausible.
And you have yourself, I believe, written for the New York Times, making the case, responding to people saying, well, we'll never know, I guess we need to move on with our lives, saying that actually a substantial investigation looking at aspects of COVID's origins could provide new insights into how it came to be, could shore up one of the major theories that it's not true that we have to just kind of shake our heads and say, oh, well, we'll never know.
Yeah, so we're saying in the case of even plane crashes, you do an independent investigation. The nuclear and chemical accidents, you do an independent investigation. But in this case, the US and German intelligence agencies have assessed a very likely lab leak that has caused this pandemic and killed millions of people. And there's no independent investigation, no accountability, still no independent oversight over such risky research. Last month, a top research journal published more of the same type of risky pathogen research done again at low biosafety levels. So there has been no responsibility taken by the scientists or the research funders of such experiments.
Yes, that's so key to point out that this same research continues, even though the consensus is, we still don't know for sure, but that, there are more FBI, CIA, Energy Department organizations throughout the world. We now know that Germany had this conclusion for years, and yet the research continues under the same kinds of lax safety standards. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's not even, I frequently say, well, if this research absolutely must be done, could it be done in Antarctica or on the moon or something? Why does it have to be done by scientists in a Chinese lab that have misled the world?
Yeah, there certainly have to be higher standards, and there are many ways to make this work safer without banning it outright, because there's a strong biodefense angle to it, and it's really hard to stop virologists from doing it because they all think they're saving lives or contributing to biodefense. And so what has to be done is the work should be centralized in an isolated location, like you said. Maybe not such harsh locations, but somewhere very, very nice. Somewhere very nice for the scientists to go spend half the year, quarantine well before coming back to the rest of civilization.
Nice tropical island.
Yeah, a nice tropical island, the best food, chefs, everything, all provided, everything provided for them there. They go there every year for their annual, risky experiments, and then they come back to civilization, right? So I think that should be done. That's a cost worth paying to protect billions of lives. Because imagine if COVID-19 had been much more severe, like the 2003 SARS outbreak, which killed 1 in 10 people. Imagine if COVID-19 killed 1 in 10 people. Like, how much of civilization would be left standing today?
And that's the game!
You've disconnected from the hive mind. Explain.